Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Cincinnati Zoo Botanical Garden and to our Lords of the Arctic polar bear habitat. My name is Sam. I'm here to introduce you guys today to our two polar bears that call Cincinnati home. First up, we've got Anana, the smaller one out here. She is our female. She's about 17 years old right now, weighs in about 430 pounds. So a pretty big animal, but she is on the petite side even for a female polar bear. She's been like that her whole life though, so will probably continue to be so in the future. Now you can tell the bigger guy over there, our male, is a lot bigger than she is. That's the little one, so his name might not make a whole lot of sense, but he was the smaller of two cubs when he was first born, so that's kind of how he got his name. He's weighing in around 725 pounds, so quite a bit bigger than she is, but still not as big as he could be. These guys have been known to get up to 1,500 pounds out in the wild. That's over double his current size, which is enormous. However, male polar bears average closer to 900, so he's not too far off. But why are they so much smaller? Well, that comes from the fact that they're here in Cincinnati and not out in the wild. These guys don't need to be kept quite as warm here all year round, so they have less blubber or fat on their body and less fur to help them regulate their body temperatures better. These guys out in the wild live in very cold, icy climates up in the North Pole, also known as the Arctic Circle, and it's a huge expanse covered by ice, and their habitat covers 5 countries. They live in Russia, Norway, Greenland, Canada, and the good old US of A in Alaska. Now they're going to travel all over the place doing all of their hunting. These guys walk miles every day. Now these guys are very well adapted for that climate, and the first thing you're going to notice about them is their white fur. So that fur, believe it or not, is actually not white, but clear and hollow, and gets that white appearance from the reflection of the light off of the snow and ice around it, which then helps them camouflage with their surroundings. It's perfect. You might notice our bears are looking a little more yellow though, and that's okay. It's a couple of reasons. Because they're older. These guys are 17 and 28, which is a little on the older side. The average polar bear lives about 15 to 18 years in the wild, and with age comes yellowing. So the other reason is going to be from algae growth. Things like algae like to grow in wet, humid climates, and here in Cincinnati it gets pretty humid in the summer, so that algae gets a chance to grow. But don't worry, it doesn't hurt them at all. Just kind of discolors their fur a little bit, makes them a little bit more yellow. Now underneath all that clear, hollow fur is a layer of black skin. And that black skin is going to help trap the heat from the sun and keep them warmer. Just like wearing a black sweater on a warm day makes you even hotter, makes you sweat a lot. You can kind of tell that they've got that black layer of skin, even though you can't see through their fur because their nose is black. That's one of the ways you can tell. And underneath that is all of their blubber. Polar bears have a layer of blubber that's about 4 inches thick, so they have a ton of fat all over their body. And that is their main source of insulation for keeping warm, which is really important because the waters up there are very frigid and they love to swim. These guys have a scientific name of Ursus maritimus, which literally translates to marine bear. These guys are considered actually a marine mammal instead of a land mammal because they just love to swim so much. These guys have giant paws, about a foot across, about the size of a large dinner plate, that really help them power forward through the water and get going. They also have back feet that kind of act like a rudder on a boat to help them steer. These guys are so powerful in swimming, in fact, they've been known to be found as far as 65 miles off the nearest coast. That's like swimming from here all the way to Kings Island, taking a few laps around that park and coming all the way back. I certainly would never be able to do that, so that is absolutely incredible. But despite all that swimming, they actually spend a good majority of their time on the ice because that is where they get their food, believe it or not, which is actually a huge problem for them. The ice caps are melting right now due to things like fossil fuels and carbon emissions. Now that all sounds a little bit crazy, but basically what it's doing is creating this heat-trapping blanket around the globe that's making the Earth warm up little by little each year. Just like we like to cocoon ourselves in blankets in the winter to stay nice and warm, the same thing is happening to the Earth right now, except it's not quite as good for the Earth as it is for us. So what can we do at home? This sounds like a huge problem that's going to take a lot of work to solve, and it will. But there are little things you can do at home as well to really help negate some of those effects. Things like taking out your charger when you're not using it, because it'll actually continue to use electricity even if you don't have anything plugged into it. Turning off a light switch when you leave a room or go somewhere else. Or even having your parents move the thermostat up or down by maybe 2 degrees, depending on the season, will really help, continue to get those carbon emissions lower. But what can one person really do? That doesn't seem like I'm really doing a whole lot. It might not seem that way, but when you're doing it and all the thousands of people here at the Cincinnati Zoo start doing it, That is a huge impact, and that is where we're going to come together and save not only Inanna and Little One, but their cousins out in the wild who are relying on that ice for their food. That's right, even though they do most of their swimming, these guys actually do a lot of hunting on the ice. So these guys are what we call still hunters. Seals make holes in the ice that they use to come up to breathe, and polar bears love ringed seals. So they're gonna sit down at that hole, and very patiently they'll wait, and they'll wait, and they'll wait, until that seal comes up to breathe. They're gonna snatch it right out of the water. They love ringed seals, so they are more than willing to wait a little while for them. They'll eat some fish that come by as well. These guys are also really good ambush hunters on land. They can follow their prey for hundreds of yards and then swoop in and grab them. But you know, polar bears gotta eat. If they really need food, they're gonna eat plants, berries, whatever they can find, just like any other bear. Which is why you'll sometimes here at the zoo see some really odd foods in their habitat. Things like lettuce or corn or watermelon. Those are what we call enrichment items. So enrichment can mean many different things to our animals here around the zoo, but generally it's going to be something that exercises our animals mentally or physically. So it could be new foods for them to try that they might not normally get in their wild diet. It could be hiding those foods to have them hunt, putting them in puzzle feeders to make them think a little bit harder, or even just giving them new toys to play with to keep things interesting. So we try and do that for all of our animals here around the zoo, not just our polar bears, because it keeps them all mentally and physically active. Another good form of this is training. We use a form of training called operant conditioning, just a fancy way of saying positive reinforcement. Basically, if they do what we ask them to do, they get a treat, whatever it is that they really like. The polar bears usually some sort of meat. And then if they don't do the behavior we ask, there's absolutely no punishment for them at all. They just don't get that reward until they do the correct behavior. And we can ask them to do things that are really gonna help in their daily care. So we can ask them to do things like putting up their paw. We can check for cuts and scrapes on that soft pad. They can open their mouths so that we can check their gums and teeth and make sure that's really healthy. A lot of our animals have been trained to put their hips up to a fence so that we can do things like vaccines to keep them healthy, and blood draws if they're feeling a little bit under the weather. With Inanna here, we're actually trying to work on getting her trained for ultrasounds, because we're really hoping one day her and Little One will have a cub here at the zoo. And helping the keepers with that is our amazing research team, Crew. Crew is world-renowned in their polar bear research and work with all the polar bears across the country to do as much research as they possibly can. And there's one specific thing that they really study about these bears every day. Their poop. They study poop day in, day out to find out as much as they can about these polar bears. They're gonna find out if they're pregnant, what their cycle is to help them become pregnant, or if they're carrying enough weight and nutrients to become pregnant. Now, why all this focus on pregnancy and reproduction? Polar bears actually have a very low reproductive rate right now, which is another thing that's causing concern for polar bears in the wild. Their populations are declining because they're not reproducing well. So if we're able to figure out what's going on with reproduction with our own bears here at the zoo, we can apply that to the bears in the wild and help save their populations as well. So we're really hoping Inanna and Little One will have a cub one day, and Inanna's gonna be a great mom when she does. She's one, had cubs before, so she's got lots of experience, but two, polar bear moms are just really dedicated in general. When polar bears are first born, they're only 1.3 pounds. Compared to the 430 and 725 these guys are, that's tiny. That's like a 150-pound adult having a baby the size of a small apple. That baby is not ready to be out in the world yet. So what mom will do is she'll actually build a den around them. Them meaning that they can have 1 or 2 cubs. She'll build a den around them and stay there with them for about 8 months until they're big and furry and can handle that Arctic climate a little bit better. Now here's the kicker. Mom doesn't really leave. She stays in that den, very rarely leaving so that she can protect those cubs for that full 8 months. So no food, no water, just living off her own fat reserves while she nurses those cubs. And that is extreme dedication on her part. But the care doesn't stop there. The bears will then continue to stay with their mom for up to 3 years while they learn to hunt. So even though polar bears are innate hunters, they know they need to hunt, they don't always know how. Mom is the one that teaches them those skills. So once she's taught them enough that they can successfully hunt on their own without her assistance, they'll go off on their own. Polar bears typically tend to be solitary animals, so eventually they will leave mom. I want to thank you guys for coming out to listen to me today. If you want other fun things to do here at the zoo, check out Jungle Trails right behind us, home to a lot of the Cincinnati Zoo's amazing primates. I'll stick around a little bit longer in case you guys have any questions or missed any parts of my chat. I'd love to stick around and talk to you guys a little bit longer. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day here at the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Gardens.